Warm welcome to this Pensions Dashboard oral evidence session. Could we start with some introductions, please, if you'd like to start from that end?
My name is Byrnes. I'm the head of personal finance at Moneybox. Moneybox is a digital saving and investing app serving 1.5 million customers across the UK.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Richard Smith, independent consultant. I've had various roles on dashboards, two being in 2023, I did a research tour of the 5 countries who've had dashboards for decades. And in 2024, I've been the volunteer chair of an informal group of 15 firms who all want to offer a regulated pension dashboard. We've called it PDOC, the Pension Dashboard Operators Coalition.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Gubler. I chair the Pensions Administration Standards Association. I also sit on the PDP, was steering and now advisory group. I'm also a independent trustee of a master trust, which is preparing to connect to dashboards.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Maurice Titley. I'm commercial director at a technology and consultancy firm called Lumera. We are one part of a partnership that has an ISP, integrated services provider, that we'll tell you more about hopefully in this session. I'm also the chair of the PASA dashboards working group that Kim just referred to, supporting industry in their endeavours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm going to ask the first question, and it's specifically to Richard, but if anybody else wants to chip in, that would be very welcome as well. So for viewers at home, could you explain a little bit more about what the pension dashboard is and why the UK needs them?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, of course. Most people, your constituents, carry great fear with pensions, and dashboards are fantastic online services that really help with this and so much more. They let you see information on your different pensions together, state, workplace, personal. In testing, I've personally witnessed the visceral reaction of people to dashboards when they see on their phone a simple list of pensions. There's oh my gosh, this is fantastic, when can I have it? Plus, regulated dashboards are on existing familiar apps from trusted brands that people already use and quite often. And just to bring that to life a little bit, so I'm a Lloyds Bank customer of 40 years. I love their banking app. I'll very likely look at the pensions dashboard that Lloyds Bank add to their app. My 26-year-old daughter, by contrast, has a lifetime ISA with Moneybox, as it happens. So when Brian's firm put a pensions dashboard onto the Moneybox app, which she likes, she'll probably look at all of her pensions there. So lots of different dashboards for different consumers, all showing the same data, but bringing that data to where they already go. Now, those regulated dashboards are incredibly tightly regulated by lots of different bits of government regulation, quite rightly, to protect consumers. And that warrants a bit of explanation, Chair, but I just wondered if I should pause there in case there's any questions on what I've said already before I sort of press on with that. No,
what we'll do is we'll go around on that, but it would be useful if you could draw on your experience internationally and how the UK compares with that, if that's okay.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, I'll definitely get to that very shortly. So, yes, so very tight control of regulated dashboards, but also really tight control on what you can do next. So FCA are allowing regulated dashboards to offer highly regulated, what are called post-view services after you've viewed your pensions. And these help different sorts of consumers in all sorts of different ways, specific to their own personal pension data. Brian will probably say more about this, but for example, you can click through to get regulated advice, or you can get through to FCA's new targeted support, which can be a game changer. I'm sure there'll be more from that from the subsequent panels. But crucially, you can click through to take action to improve your pension position. Now, that is really, really key, and I'll come back to it. Now, there's also another dashboard from government called the Money Helper dashboard. Now, that's a universal service, so it obviously can't support the kind of customer-specific onward action in the way I was just describing. I think you can see Money Helper as a sort of basic backup dashboard for the important but quite small minority of people who don't use any financial apps. I think 87% of people use one sort of online banking or another. All dashboards, though, and it's really important to understand this, they show the same data because they connect into the same data retrieval service. And in my written evidence to the committee chair, I linked out to a short explanatory video that my son made. And I've just bought a screen grab from that along today because I find it's quite a complex ecosystem. It really helps just to have a picture in front of you. It's in the shape of an hourglass. It's an industry government sandwich. So at the top, you've got consumers, your constituents, accessing their dashboard of choice, for example, like Byrnes or another firms. Whichever dashboard they use, though, they connect into the middle, which is the government secure data retrieval service, including the critically important gov.uk One Login Identity service, which I'm sure you'll hear more about later. And then at the bottom, there are all the UK's pension schemes providers who are compelled by law now to make their data digitally searchable, and that's Kim's and Maurice's side of the fence. Delivering all the layers of the ecosystem is key, and in my experience, there are very few individuals who actually understand the whole ecosystem. Why would they? There are very different disciplines at each of the different layers, if that makes sense. But the consumer journey is obviously vertically through it. And this comes, Chair, to the first point about international experience. But did you want to come in with a question?
No, I was just going to say, ask rather what the current challenges and opportunities are for the industry in this regard.
Yes, so key challenge is collaboration. Okay. The key message I heard from all the continental teams, and just for the transcript, that's in Belgium, Denmark, Sweden, Norway and the Netherlands, is you won't get dashboards done unless there's truly humble, trusting, collaborative relationships between all the relevant parts of government and all the relevant parts of industry. Now, I've got some more to say about whether we've got that level of collaboration yet, but maybe we'll come on to that. The opportunity is the private sector dashboards. So I've got some usage stats that may be relevant. So overseas, at the top of the ecosystem, top of the hourglass, private sector dashboards are by far the most used. So in Norway, in 2024, the government dashboard, the money helper equivalent, was used 1.3 million times. Private sector dashboards, though, were used 35 million times. So 30 times as much. And I think in the UK it's instructive to look at some existing usage figures. So you can already look at your state pension today online on gov.uk. DWP tell me that's only been used 6 million times since last April. And just for context, the working age population, of course, is about 42 million. So people don't go to government sites to look at these things unless they're particularly interested, maybe as they're getting towards state pension age. By contrast, Lloyds tell me that their app is logged into 6 billion times a year. Yeah. Broadly, it's about 300 accesses from their 20 million customers. That's where we get to the 6 billion. Now, I'm not going to look at my pensions 300 times a year. That will be bonkers. But I might look at it 3, 4, 5 times a year because I'm already going to the app. So regulated dashboards on highly used apps, like in Norway, dramatically increases usage of dashboards and the pension awareness that follows.
Thank you. Can I bring Kim in
Yep.
here? As she's been trying for a while.
Thank you, Chair. To be honest, I think many of us underestimate how difficult it is for people to know the value of their pensions. It's almost like they're trying to create a picture without knowing how many pieces of the puzzle there is. And what Dashboard does is it creates that one place, whether it's a good answer or a bad answer. If you ask anyone out in the street how many pensions they've got, where are they? A lot of them will tell you, I think I have some, I know where 1 or 2 are. And what dashboards will do is create that central place alongside state pension. And for many people, Richard and I, we don't necessarily always agree with that, but for many people, that will be enough. It may not be the best answer for everybody, but we just have to think about dashboard. It's not just a technology project. It actually can be a catalyst for financial empowerment. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but we have to look at where we're going with this.
Thank you. Can I just ask, in terms of Baroness Altman's comments recently, suggesting that it wouldn't, industry dashboards wouldn't be ready by next year. Is that your view?
Well, we've got to think about the majority of large private sector pension schemes are going to be connected by sort of late spring, and a lot of those, the experience is that these schemes, as Richard was saying at the bottom, they're already, they've done an awful lot of work to be ready to connect. But connection is the beginning of that journey. We've got all of this user testing that's going to start happening from the Money Helper dashboard and PDP probably from sort of May, June. And we're not going to know how it will have to iterate, because we won't know until we know what behaviours it drives. When people, as Richard would say, when people start seeing real data, their data, then we are going to have to nuance. For example, we had a day looking at error codes. So these, at the bottom of this hourglass, they've got to be able to say if there are issues with the estimated retirement income, with the values that they've got to put back. And there were some where we were saying, well, we don't know how people are going to react to this. It's only going to be evident once people start actually seeing those.
Thank you. I'm going to move on now. Steve Darling.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for coming today. It was just really, the chair's already slightly touched on this. I'd be really grateful. So we've got this deadline of October 26 for the ecosystem to be fully up and running of these dashboards. Are there any costs that really haven't been foreseen? Are we confident that this is all in online there for the costs? Also, I just really also wanted to understand, as far as the game plan for achieving this deadline, are you confident that that is laid out so that can be achieved without slippage? And slippage is clearly our enemy in a lot of areas, but do you fear slippage of this October 26 date for this actually fully functioning system to be up and running?
You want to start?
Can I start with thanks, Richard. So I think one part of the answer to the question is around the way that schemes and providers need to connect in to what we call the dashboards ecosystem. Yeah. So I think a very key thing about this, as you can see on Richard's sort of hourglass, there's no sort of central database that holds information about people, that holds information about pensions. So the way this whole approach works is you have to have connection technology that supports, when a saver uses a dashboard, searching every single place where it might find a pension. And then when a saver wants to see the results of that, they need to see all those pensions appear. They could be coming from 10 different places, 10 different pensions, and it needs to look like a dashboard, not like a sort of a slowly sort of chugging away comparison site or something that sort of pulls them in one by one. This connection technology is being created by industry, and it's called ISPs, where it's being provided on a commercial basis for lots of different schemes, or some providers are actually connecting themselves. The progress with that is good. People have put a lot of effort into what they've built. I think there's a big sort of question to say, how is it all going to work? Because the way these have been designed have been down to the individual parties that have built them. There's about 20 parties that are actually doing this connection. In terms of the readiness for October 26, so these parties that have the connection technology, they are testing the interfaces with the pensions dashboards ecosystem with the PDP team at the moment, and there's a little bit of a queue to get through that, but that will clear out long before October 2026, and that will be in place. But I think there will be a need to make changes over the course of the testing of the actual Money Helper dashboard, where we're actually going to have use of dashboards. There's no doubt that the data providers and the connection technology providers are going to have to make changes. And I think it's really important to be aware of that, and that we work in a very collaborative way with the PDP team to actually have our sort of say, if you like, in terms of what we think the changes should be and how they can be applied in a quick and efficient way over the course of the next 18 months.
Thank you.
Could I act as maybe just a quick bridge to Brian? Because there was one point you mentioned in the question there about the ecosystem being done by October 26. A slight refinement there. Just thinking again about the hourglass, which I always find incredibly helpful. Building from the bottom, the legislation to compel schemes to make their data available is done. So I did the data standards 5 years ago on the programme, and then government spent 5 years making the legislation to compel schemes to do that. So schemes are now very ready, as Kim has said, and as Maurice has said, technology providers, ISPs, are connecting that into the central digital architecture. Capgemini have built the central digital architecture, so that is done. That is all that has to be in place by October 26. One really key lesson from the continent, and this is doesn't make me very happy to say this, every other country, they got the whole ecosystem working with a very narrow set of data at the bottom with 2 or 3 pension providers, and then they got the whole vertical ecosystem working, and they got all the teething troubles sorted, including testing with real consumers, the sort of things that Maurice and Kim have been talking about. Then when they sorted all those problems, then they broadened the data coverage. In the Netherlands case, they mandated the data coverage across the whole industry. What we have done in this country is mandated the whole of the industry to connect from next month into an ecosystem that remains untested with live consumers with real data. So that is a real problem, and I think that will remain a problem for testing. And there's one other thing before I hand to Brian to say, there's Money Helper dashboard, but we know, as I've articulated already, most consumers want to use a regulated dashboard on an app they frequently use and trust, and we are nowhere near getting those regulated dashboards done.
Yeah, I think in terms of our connection up to the central digital architecture ahead of the deadlines, Moneybox launched our pension only in 2020. We're a digital first company. Our data is relatively clean and simple compared to potentially some others out there. So we need to connect by end of April this year, and that is going well. We're using an ISP, and that is relatively simple. The real key question then is what comes next in terms of when do consumers access the government website and then potentially commercial pensions dashboards going forwards.
Thank you.
So yes, slippage. There will be slippage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, could I just interject? What we have found is connection going through the integrated service providers to the central digital architecture. But ultimately, people, what they're looking for is their estimated retirement income. And what we're finding is a lot of the sort of medium and smaller size schemes, their data is not fully digitised. PASA did some research and they found that only like 40% of schemes are fully digitised, and the rest, it's a mix of paper, digitised and scanned PDFs, which all need human intervention. So a scheme connecting to the central digital architecture doesn't mean that that a person is going to have a great experience. They may have the majority in private sector schemes, the majority of members are in private sector, large private sector. But because you're seeing all of your pensions in one place, you need to have the same user experience across of those. And that's where, so we do think that there's going to be quite a lot of data cleanse work that happens afterwards.
Thank you. Yes.
If I could just quickly add, and one example of what Kim's referring to there is the data that's required to do what's called matching. So when you get the request through to search for pensions, the personal details, first name, surname, date of birth need to be compared with the data that's held on the admin platforms, on the pension administration platforms. And that data can quite easily get out of date. So the surnames change, addresses change, that they can be used in matching as well. National insurance number is an optional item to provide. That's really useful if it is provided. We don't know how many people are going to actually provide that. So how that matching works is absolutely key, and what we don't want is, as an industry, to have people phoning up saying I couldn't see my pension at all on the dashboard, when there should be solutions out there to help with that from a technology point of view, but also improving the quality of those personal details that are held ahead of the big usage of dashboards that's coming.
Thank you. Mel.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question following on from some of the things you've already been saying, but the government's decided to prioritise the Money Helper scheme over commercial dashboards. Do you think that's the right approach? Perhaps Kim, if you'd like to start.
The panel know that I have this real issue with the word commercial. To me, it's private sector dashboard and the public sector dashboard. It's a bit like we have NHS and we have private health. They serve different needs, but they do the same thing. And as Richard will say to you, because of some of the uncertainty, like, for example, the design standards are as yet undefined, a lot of the organisations which would normally put forward or be in build of one of these private sector dashboards, they're finding it very difficult to create the business case to be able to finish that and push that through. So it's almost like a plea to government. We've got the commitment from PDP, and DWP has said that commercial dashboards, private sector dashboards, will happen. But we need to have more certainty so that those organisations that would build them, so that when people come through, they can look on their Lloyds or their NatWest or whatever.
Thank you.
I think my answer to your question about prioritising Money Helper will be a caveated yes. So my understanding is that by prioritising the Money Helper dashboard, we will get that launched sooner than if we try to do both the Money Helper and the private sector dashboards at the same time. As Mr. Smith has pointed out in his evidence, the priority now is getting a dashboard launched. We have 12.5 million people in the UK under saving for retirement before housing costs in retirement are factored in. We have 31 billion in lost pension pots across 3.3 million lost pensions. That, I think, is a bit of an understatement. The most powerful thing that we can do for people is reunite them with pension savings that they have already made. That will not take any further contributions from their pocket. It won't take any further contributions from the government pocket. So it will be a caveated yes. The caveat is we need to be doing the work around the private sector dashboards at the same time as we are trying to launch the Money Helper dashboard. We cannot launch the Money Helper dashboard and then turn and say, okay, what about these private sector dashboards? We need to be doing the prep work at the same time.
I was advised before coming, it's good to not always completely agree. I do agree with everything Brian said, but also another key point, this point about adequacy. So the really important thing to understand is total estimated retirement income. Kim's mentioned, so I've got 9 pensions, so Kim and the other schemes will all calculate at the bottom of the hourglass my estimated retirement income from 9 pensions. They all get sent through, and then a dashboard like Brian's or Lloyd's or whatever is only allowed to do one sum, which is add them up to do a total estimated retirement income. And there's an example on the left of the diagram, so 2,500 a month. It enables people to say, could I live on that in retirement? About half of the working age savers in this country are going to see a number that they don't think is adequate. Adequacy is a very, very personal thing, and we know the government's review is paused. Money Helper cannot help you with a click-through to do something about it. Private sector dashboards, oh, by the way, commercial. One of the 15 PDOC firms said to me, Richard, this is so tightly regulated. It's about the most non-commercial thing our firm could do. So they're not commercial, but they're going to enable firms to help their customers. So private sector dashboards enable you to click through and top up your contributions, do something about the inadequate total estimated retirement income. I worry that if we have an extended period of Money Helper, we're just creating more fear by showing people total ERIs which aren't enough to live on and not giving them help to do something about it.
Do you think that an ability to, well, if it prompted you to take advice or guidance, that would be sufficient? I know that's not an actual top up, but
I think. So a lot of people said to me, well, what do the Continentals do? You know, what do they do next? And I think the great unknown here in the UK is we don't really know. That's why the testing is so important to understand the real consumer reaction. There's another really important point, the continental aspect. The 5 countries I visited all have what I call a Bismarckian system, whereby Pillar 1 or state provision is a much higher proportion of average earnings, if that makes sense. So in Belgium, 91% of retirement income on average is state, is Pillar 1, so the vast majority. In contrast, the UK has a Beveridgean system. State pension reaches 12 grand a year next month, and average earnings is 36, so about a third. You could live on 12 grand a year, but not very comfortably. So the Dutch team said to me, Richard, the Dutch dashboard for the last decade has shown Dutch citizens they're broadly going to be okay. Your dashboards in the UK are going to tell people broadly they're not going to be okay. So we need to support people in every way we can with taking next steps, but we don't really know how and when they're going to do that, and that's why we need to get on with the testing, both of Money Helper and private sector regulated dashboard as soon as possible.
Madam Chair, could
could
I just mention, going back to serving different needs, certainly in my discussions with the Money Helper dashboard team, they're seeing the people that ultimately use the Money Helper dashboard will be people that maybe want to click through and have debt advice. They will use other of the Money Helper services, whereas maybe the people that are using the private sector dashboard may have different requirements. But I have to sort of come back to this. You were talking about collaboration, and we need, we've clearly got really good collaboration between like PASA and PDP, Money Helper and the like, and the regulators. But some of the things that I have been asked to sort of say is that, like, for example, with those schemes at the bottom of the hourglass, they are mandated to show all pensions, all parts of a scheme that connect at the same time. That includes additional voluntary contributions. They are regulated generally by the insurers, and by they're the insurers. They're regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, and some of those insurers are being very slow at engaging with the schemes. So a lot of schemes are really getting very nervous that they won't be able to connect both at the same time. And at PASA, we've created a toolkit to try and support them in this, but it is something where greater collaboration, because we know that the pensions regulator is very aware of that, but we need to make sure that the Financial Conduct Authority also works with the regulator.
Very good point, and they will be our next panel.
Yes.
We'll have to be reasonably swift because I'm conscious of time. But Brian, question for you, because you Moneybox are actually developing your dashboard right now. What's your experience been of that so far? Do you think, is there anything the government or MAPS could do to help you? And also, you're having to answer to two sets of regulation, one by MAPS, one by the FCA. Is that a problem for you?
I think on the first question, I'd love to sit here and say that we are building something right now, but we're not building anything. We have no ability to do that with how much uncertainty is there at the moment. So Moneybox build on 8 or 16-week cycles, depending on the size of the project. This would be a large project. Last year, I had our development teams and our product managers coming to me saying, "What can we get started on anything from a commercial pensions dashboard?" And I just had to keep saying, "No, we don't have the certainty. We don't have the timelines." They've stopped asking me now, basically, on that. So we're not building anything. There's lots of meetings, lots of reading, and lots of waiting for final data standards, design standards. We are supposed to get a timeline on the back of the work that is happening with KPMG at the moment. My concern for that is we don't have a launch date for the Money Helper dashboard, so I'm skeptical whether we are going to then get a subsequent launch date for private sector dashboards, and if we might do, it might be some stage like quite far into the future, if I'm being optimistic, 2029, 2030. And if we get that, I would be pulled off this project. Moneybox would turn to me and say, we can't dedicate time to this over the next kind of 2 or 3 years. And the government, the regulator, all of the various bodies involved would lose lots of the opportunity for collaboration because people just wouldn't be able to dedicate the resource. On your second question, I would say the multiple bodies involved, less onerous, slightly confusing. There's not just the two that you mentioned. There is maybe 10 acronyms that we could say, and they are all incredibly interrelated. I've been very close to this over the last year to 18 months, and I've still had to rely on Mr. Smith at times to explain to me the various interdependencies between all of the various entities that are involved in this. One thing I will say that is quite onerous and potentially, depending on your point of view, kind of rightly so, the way that the FCA will regulate private sector dashboards is incredibly restrictive and onerous. So Mr. Smith has given some examples of logging into Lloyds or logging into Moneybox and seeing your various pensions. It will not be that seamless or that smooth. So Moneybox have an app and we have a website where you can log in, you can see all of your accounts, you can take various actions. We will need to build a separate, completely separate environment, a separate dashboard that people will have to log into separately from their Moneybox account. They will go into that. That is where they will see and view only their pensions information. What you can do in that separate environment is incredibly restrictive. It is absolutely no transactions whatsoever, so no consolidation, for example. You can't top up your pensions. You can do a small amount of, again, very restrictive, what's called post-view services, so some retirement modelling. But essentially, you can kind of take a peek in there and then you come back into the service that you were using with Lloyds or Moneybox. You can't copy and paste anything from there into the Moneybox environment. So that is the restrictive, onerous part. I'm very conscious of my wording here. I can understand how we have gotten to that point, but I would just like to make the committee aware that it is not a case that you would log into Moneybox, Lloyds and suddenly see all of your pensions there. It is still going to live in a very separate, restricted world.
That was Brian being optimistic, but frankly, it breaks my heart to share my view with you. I don't think, even though your constituents desperately need and want them, that we're going to see any FCA-regulated dashboards. It's so sad. There was a LinkedIn poll, a large-scale LinkedIn poll finished last week. 40% of industry respondents don't think we'll ever see them.
Okay, John, I think you've got one more quick question, haven't you?
No, I've worked it in.
You'll do that.
That's very illuminating. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm ever so sorry. We have to move on to Amanda Hack.
Thank you, Chair. Richard, you've done research over the other pension dashboards in other countries. You've mentioned a little bit about the different styles of pensions across those other countries. Yes. But are there elements of things that we could really learn from them in terms of how they've implemented it, how they've enable people to take control of their pensions?
Yeah, sure. So super quick. First to say, there's so much to learn. This is why I put all my research findings in the public domain on my blog. And by the way, if I can put on public record, huge thanks to the 5 continental teams. They were so generous with their time and learning and insights. I thought 5 countries, I'd just pull out 5 verbs and say a sentence about each of them. So it's the acronym CLASS. So C, collaborate. I think I've mentioned this already. They all said you have to collaborate. If I may, Chair, I'm just holding up the purple brochure of Min Pension, which is the Swedish dashboard. On page 1, just for the transcript, it's a pie chart. It's a very simple pie chart of 2 semicircles. I said to Anders Lundström in Stockholm, why have you got such a boring pie chart on page 1? He said, Richard, that is the most important page of this whole report. You will only get dashboards done if you have joint decision making and joint funding of dashboards. That's exactly not what we've got in the UK. Industry is pretty much funding the whole thing in this country, either directly or through levies to MAPS, and has zero control over joint decisions. And the big decisions like the reset in 2023 and Money Helper First, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but they're not even not collaborative decisions, they're not even consultative decisions. So we do not have the collaboration that all the continental teams said we need to have. L, launch. They said, Richard, you spent far too long talking about dashboards. I don't know. I think they meant the UK. I don't think they meant me personally. They said you just need to launch because then you will start getting live user feedback and then you will be able to iterate and forever. The Danish dashboard is 25 years old and it's got better and better and better. It's on version 7 now. A, amplify. Don't just have one dashboard. Enable private sector apps and you will dramatically amplify the reach of the service and the user feedback you get, as we've already touched on. When you launch, S, segment. You will understand that not all consumers are the same. Of course they're not. They're widely different. And the needs, the onward support needs they have are widely diverse. And you obviously can help those in this country with regulated dashboards if we ever get them. And the other S, the other thing you will learn is simplify. You will need to understand that most people want very, very simple online interface. And this is a really interesting stat. They gave me reams and reams of statistics of which users at what time of the day spend how much time on which pages of their dashboards. It was a lot. Most users don't click through beyond the homepage where they see total ERI. Most people just want to know, am I going to be okay? And this is the major issue in this country on adequacy. At least half of users on UK dashboards are not going to be okay. Therefore, we need private sector dashboards to help them do something about that. Collaborate. If we manage to collaborate, launch, amplify, segment and simplify, we will have done a great thing for 42 million working age adults.
I think one of the things that this committee has looked at is pension adequacy. It's something that we have been focusing on, and I suppose it is whether or not there was anything from the international examples about whether or not adequacy changed as engagement with dashboards improved.
Adequacy wasn't really the major driving force in the continental countries because of the Bismarckian systems, and you can even see that on the graphical images. You see state pension is the major bar, and then workplace, or pillar 2, if you like, is just a little bit on top. It's like a top-up. So in Belgium, most people just take their workplace pension as a cash lump sum because it's relatively small. They don't use it as a recurring income because they use state, if that makes sense. And that's true of most of the continental countries, and certainly the ones. There's a real irony that the countries that didn't really need dashboards because of adequacy did them 20 years ago. The one country that really needed to do them, and in fact I was involved in 2002, the previous Labour government in 2002 tried to do this, and I was involved then. So I've been on dashboards 23 years, and we need to get them done. The great thing, because of total ERI on the homepage, dashboards finally end the invisibility of inadequacy.
Yeah,
very helpful. Thank you so much. That concludes the questions that we have, and would you believe, very unlike this committee, we've actually finished early. Which so if there are any remarks you want to make in literally 30 seconds, that will be you're very welcome to do that.
Just a very quick one. The whole point about seeing whether the pension is going to be adequate or not, that absolutely relies on all the pensions being found. Yes. And so matching is really important, and also getting all those schemes onboarded so that coverage is there when people start looking at it.
Thank you. Kim, did you want to add to that?
And for me, I think, as both Richard and Maurice said, what for me is the important thing about pensions dashboards is it will hold a mirror up to people's pensions. And we don't know where that will lead us, but it has to start somewhere, and it will iterate. Thank you.
This has been a short but very, very informative panel. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Fantastic.
And we're going to move swiftly on to the next panel. If you'd like to join us at the table once that's vacated.
No, it was very good. Very good.
Richard, impressive.
Right.
You're passionate. You've been on this long time. Absolutely, what we're doing is not going to work.
Introductions and then move on to you, Joe. Is that okay?
A very useful acronym that he shared.
Nikkei next to Sarah and myself next to David, please. So we're in the same organisations. Is that okay? So if you put me here.
Can't remember anything.
So just keep us together. Thank you.
You get your water before we kick off. And can we start with some introductions, please, starting at that end?
Trost, I head the department that looks after asset management pension policy at the FCA.
Thank you.
Sarah Pritchard, Executive Director, Supervision, Policy and Competition, Executive Responsibility for Pensions at the Financial Conduct Authority.
Thank you.
My name is David Walmsley. I'm Director of Supervision, responsible for Trusteeship and governance, administration, which includes dashboards and DB regulation.
Thank you.
And I'm Lucy Stone. I lead the Pensions Regulator team that is helping schemes prepare for their dashboard duties, but also we're putting in place the compliance and processes to monitor and, if necessary, enforce non-compliance.
Thank you very much. And the first question is Joe Baxter.
Thank you. So the FCA and the pensions regulator are responsible for ensuring that pension providers make their data available to the dashboard's ecosystem. Can you explain a bit more about your role in regulating providers?
I start? So from the FCA perspective, as you may know, we're responsible for regulating the conduct overall of about 42,000 firms to enable a fair and thriving financial services sector. In the pension space, you're quite right, we are responsible to make sure that the pension schemes connect, which is an important part of making sure that dashboards can go live. We're responsible for around about 150 providers that will be connecting when the dashboards launch.
Thank you. And the pensions regulator, we regulate occupational pension schemes. There's 2,700 of them in scope to connect to the dashboards. And we see dashboards as a transformational opportunity to really connect those people with pensions. So there's, just to set the scene, there's three key points I'd like to make. This is really complex. The industry has achieved a lot, but that 2,700 schemes that need to connect, and there's 48 million records within them schemes that we need to connect. Data quality is absolutely critical for the success of dashboards, and connection to the dashboard is just the start. So there is a staggered approach to connection, which was set by DWP, so everybody must connect by October 26. And our role is really setting the expectations for the whole of them 2,700 schemes, providing the guidance so people can meet our expectations. And then we've engaged with the largest 80 schemes directly and met with them. They represent 75% of all the members who are connecting. So, in summary, it's connecting to the dashboards, ensuring that they're returning really good data quality back to the dashboards to help connect and help people make decisions, and then to stay connected to that dashboards.
So I think we heard from the previous panel how important that connections and the data will be. So I'm just conscious there are many different bodies with responsibilities in this space. Can you tell us a little bit more about how well you're working together, particularly with the pensions dashboard programme?
Shall I go first? So I would say we're working well together, in the short answer. The long answer is obviously we are all very clear on our respective roles and responsibilities, and we have multiple mechanisms to make sure that we're working well together. So, for example, we meet regularly on the design of the ecosystem, on policy matters, on the evidence to support the progress of the policy, on communications and engagement. So we've got all these meetings. In fact, the FCA and the pensions regulator attend the pensions dashboards programme board. And one thing I want to highlight is it's not just cooperation for cooperation's sake, it's actually really constructive. So there's real transparency and openness, including on risks and issues, which is one of the things that often doesn't happen. So that's working really well. Obviously, with the FCA, we are used to, because we both regulate different parts, but we're quite used to working together and making sure that as far as possible we align our approaches, because regardless of whether you are in whether you have a personal pension or an occupational pension, you should be entitled to the same saver experience. One final point I want to touch on: it's not just cooperation with these various bodies; it's also about how we work with industry. So my colleague David has mentioned that we meet with the largest firms, but we also meet with administrators, trustee firms, legal firms, and there are lots of mechanisms for us to engage with industry, including with the parties you saw earlier, just so we can really understand what issues people are facing and we can come up with collaborative solutions.
I'd just add, that's absolutely right. There are both formal mechanisms in place and regular informal dialogue between the teams, and that's part of wider collaboration with DWP and TPR on a regular basis, in this case with PDP as well, of course. And as TPR, we check in regularly with industry bodies as well.
If I just add one point, I think fundamentally the cooperation is essential, because if you're a consumer, it shouldn't matter who regulates the pensions. To make the dashboards a success, all the data needs to be connected. So that's really at the heart of everything and the heart of our focus, to make sure that from a consumer perspective, we are acting joined up together as one to support the success of the dashboards.
I was just going to follow up in terms of that. You probably heard the evidence from the first panel, and particularly what Richard Smith was saying about the importance of collaboration and the comparisons with other international examples where we weren't collaborating as much. What do you think we can do to improve that collaboration?
I'd come in to say our landscape is incredibly complex relative to those international experiences as well. So we have, as we've talked about, we've got 2,700 schemes just on our side, and that ranges from a very big commercial master trust through to a scheme that's run by the payroll department of an employer. So it's incredibly complex, and there are lots of other parties involved, such as the ISPs who are building the connections, the administrators who are preparing the data, the trustee firms, the legal firms, the advisors. So we do try and reach across the landscape and have regular engagement across the piece, but obviously you can't. We try and engage with everyone. There are lots of formal mechanisms. Things have been consulted on extensively. I mean, I've been working on dashboards for a long time, and there's been at least 4 or 5 pieces of work that have been consulted on in that time. So I think collaboration is working well. That's not to say there's always ways to improve. So we do keep an open, we'll reach out to industry and find out what more can we do. In fact, it's a question we ask, for example, in our surveys and our webinars, what more do you need from us?
Right. David Pinto de Censi, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for explaining your kind of role in the ecosystem and how you're working with other institutions. Obviously, the initial stage deadline for connection to the dashboard ecosystem was replaced last year with a single deadline of October 2026, although the government subsequently issued guidance on when different providers could be connected. Just to start with a basic question, are pension providers going to meet these suggested deadlines? And at the very least, do you expect them all to meet the 2026 October deadline?
Why don't I start? I mean, I think we have about 150 firms that have about 30 million pots to connect. About half of those firms, representing about 90% of pots, are starting to connect from the end of April, so they're in that early tranche. And I think we are very confident that they are making good progress towards that connection. And, then there's obviously time until October next year to iron out any residual issues. But I think we think there's very good progress being made.
Thank you. And how many providers and schemes have applied to defer connection, and how many of them have received a response?
Are you talking about the deferral of the legislative deadline?
Yes.
Yes. So there are 2 mechanisms. One is you could apply up to August to DWP to defer the connection deadline. I mean, you'd have to ask DWP on the precise numbers. I don't know if I'm allowed to share it because we've got quite a strict restricted information regime, but we can follow up. And I understand that the decisions are imminent on those. It is not. What I can say is that it is not. We are not significantly concerned that it's going to impact the timeline. Just to pick up, David, did you want to come in on occupational pension scheme? Because Nika talks about personal pension scheme, but we've also got a nice picture on our side.
Yeah, so thank you. So there's the 2,700 schemes that we are responsible for connecting to that dashboard. I said we've engaged with the largest 80, which is 75%, and we've communicated with all of them, by the way. And through those meetings and communications and issuing surveys, the vast majority are expected to connect in line with the staging profile. There are small numbers, very small numbers who won't connect, but there's very good reasons for that. So, for example, they're moving to an insurer, and so they just won't exist by October 26 as a scheme, or the change in administrators, and they might not meet the staging profile, but they'll expect to still meet the October 26 deadline. But the vast majority are expected to connect.
Fantastic. And I think this all speaks to a kind of question about the kind of regulatory burden on providers. So obviously appreciate that you're going through a process that will make certain requirements of providers, and it's appropriate that the FCA and the other regulatory bodies kind of regulate that. But how onerous are the duties being placed on pension providers to make data available to the ecosystem? And what kind of pushback have you had from industry?
So if I come in, obviously as regulators, and I'm sure the FCA will agree with me, we obviously do consider burden everything we do. We do want to promote growth, we do want to promote innovation, but we also obviously have to balance that about making sure that the market's delivering in the interest of savers. For dashboards, the system is partly designed with this burden in mind, so I'll give 3 examples. One is that staging profile we've been talking about, so the order in which schemes connect was designed partly so the schemes who are most able to connect are going first, so those who need more time have more time. So that was part of the design very explicitly. The second one is that it builds on existing disclosure requirements. So for most schemes, this is data they should already have. There are some schemes for which this is not the case. And finally, we talked a little bit about the engagement we're having in industry. So we're talking regularly about particular issues which are causing concern, and then we can see whether we can help or draw collaborative solutions. I wouldn't say there's been pushback. I think industry is as enthusiastic about dashboards as we are. The question is there's always challenge on the detail.
And I suppose that's the part of the question I'm asking, because I think there is broad in industry consensus around the need for something like this. The question is, what are the kind of issues they're raising around how regulation's affecting them, how it's being done? Are there any particular issues they're raising consistently?
So there are some, a lot of them are quite niche and detailed about how they apply, but this is where we work with organisations such as the Pensions Administration Standards Association to kind of put out guidance to have consistency in industry. We'll have regular meetings and take things away. We've committed to being very pragmatic because we understand this is a big programme of work for industry. So we are working through these issues that are going along. As Nika mentioned, there's informal and formal mechanisms to feed these points in. So we are trying as far as possible. So I would say it's around the detail, and we are working through that with industry.
Does the FCA want to add anything?
Yeah, of course. So just as a starting point, I think it's been touched on in the earlier session, but digitisation of records has been a huge issue for some, and actually overall the benefits once those records are digitised should really unlock future innovation and really support greater consumer engagement with pensions, which is, I think, the prize that we're all hoping for at the end when the dashboards go live. The decision to mandate all schemes to connect very much government through legislation, so our role here is very much to support that and making sure that that regulatory regime to require all the 150 FCA schemes to connect. We've been looking to implement the government legislation. As Lucy's already touched on, the information that will be displayed should be information that is available, information that's available through the annual benefit statement. So some of that was to make sure that the information was proportionate and that the burden wasn't too great for firms. But I think it is important to acknowledge that the digitisation piece has been big for firms. Just on that readiness piece, we are seeing all the right signs that firms are starting to want to connect. They're requiring registration codes from us, so they're asking us to provide the information that we need to provide in order to validate their connection in. What we do know is that firms are very keen to know the date of launch, because they will want to put consumer-facing teams in place so that when they get the queries in for partial matches, or that they get queries in from consumers if that's driving the greater engagement, they want to make sure that they're ready and they're standing ready. So we know that that is something that firms are thinking about actively, but is difficult to plan for absent a date.
Thank you. Now, 2 final questions. Obviously, other colleagues will touch on some of the balances you need to strike as regulators, but obviously the Chancellor issued remit letters at the end of last year asking both FCA and PRA to look at how policy and indeed supervision can be focused more on growth. How have you adjusted your approach to reflect that, that strengthening of the secondary growth objective?
Let me start with that. So FCA, we're fully committed to support that objective, and we set out our response to the Prime Minister's ask for steps that we could take to support that in a letter on the 16th of January. Taking the step back in terms of pensions, what do we really hope that these dashboards will drive? We've been in support of dashboards since 2015 and actually believe it's critically important to drive greater engagement for consumers with their pensions. If I give some statistics, 75% of
defined contribution pension holders aged 45 plus, based on our financial life survey in 2024, didn't have a clear plan or didn't even know that they had a choice in some of the decision making, their future decision making that would be required around pensions. So that is really, really quite a startling statistic, and we would hope to see progress through consumers' engagement, understanding, and then using dashboards to be able to point people through to different forms of advice and guidance. In relation to dashboards, the requirement on us is actually pretty clear, and we've acted as swiftly as we can, setting out the rules very early for mandatory connections and also setting out the rules early on private commercial dashboards too. I'm hoping that this will support that broader system of work that we're carrying on. There was targeted support that was touched on in the earlier panel, where we are looking at how to change the regulatory framework to help people be able to access regulated financial advice, different forms of guidance and support that will drive that greater engagement too, which I think should overall support growth and competitiveness as well.
In terms of the regulator, so I share the views. We support that growth objective, and we've also replied to number 10. Dashboards is a critical part of delivering this data quality and innovation throughout the marketplace. So we've recently announced our innovation hub. Innovation is happening throughout the super funds, products that are being offered, and this all goes to us. But the common critical feature of all of that is data quality, which dashboards is really going to shine a light on and help improve throughout this.
Thank you. And my final question is, obviously, and David, it's actually a pick up on point you raised. It sounds like, from what you're seeing, most people are on track to meet the deadlines, but obviously not everyone will. And you talked about the kind of long tail of smaller firms in particular. What will your approach be to non-compliance in the early days? Will it, and how will you manage that through pragmatically?
So, non-compliance, our primary aim is to help people do everything we expect to meet our expectations, but we stand ready to use our powers. I work very closely with our Executive Director in Compliance and Enforcement Group. Lucy, you've worked very closely on this. Do you want to expand on the detail?
Yes, that's right. So we set out a compliance and enforcement strategy, which sets out exactly how we'll approach compliance and enforcement. We consulted on this with industry and reflected their feedback. As David said, our primary ambition is to resolve the issues before they happen, but obviously we stand ready to take action where there's willful and reckless non-compliance. We do have powers available to us to do that. Just to pick up on a point around those smaller schemes. Mm-hmm. So we do recognise that what works for a large master trust may not work for the 100-person scheme administered in-house by the payroll team of an employer. So we're actually going to be doing some work very early on to talk to a sample of those schemes to understand what specific needs do they have, what do they need from us to help them comply, so we can feed that into our work. So our approach to communication will evolve, and once we hit October 26th deadline, we will look at the people who are not connected and understand why. So it might be that, you know, the simple example is they just didn't prepare. That's a relatively straightforward case, but it could be that there were challenges with capacity in the industry. So obviously we'll consider everything on a case-by-case basis and be pragmatic, but we'd be happy to send you a copy of our compliance enforcement policy if that's helpful.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just follow up on that small trust issue? It does seem a little bit of an inequity in terms of the challenges they're facing, given what we heard in the earlier panel about digitisation and so on. So exactly when will you be engaging with them? You won't wait till the October 26th deadline, will you? Okay, and really finding out their needs and what support that they could do to make sure that inequity is addressed?
That's right. So those, what we call medium schemes, are due to start connecting from January 2026. Yeah. We will be talking to them this year to understand their needs. We have, as David have said, we've written to all schemes in scope of dashboards already at least a couple of times. We have webinars, we have a guidance, we have a checklist that can help people prepare for dashboards. We are talking to the administrators of those smaller schemes, so we're already looking at them. It's just we'll go in more depth so we can make sure that our guidance offering effectively is fit for purpose as they get ready. Fantastic.
If I can just add to that, so in terms of data quality, we've already started last year a 3 phases of work to really go out and test data quality with all of the firms. So the first phase is basic data quality hygiene, so do they measure the data and report it to us? The second phase, which we're going to be starting shortly, is the matching of personal data ahead of the connection date next year, so we can really test and help the industry get all the matching data correct. And then the third phase is value data, so that's making sure that they're returning good quality, recent value data, so the members can really use that and make decisions.
And that's targeting the smaller schemes.
Yes.
Yes, fabulous, wonderful.
It's across the piece.
Across
yeah, that's
all
right.
of
But
them.
obviously, because of the way our landscape is, the majority of schemes connecting are in those smaller scheme categories. So yes, they will absolutely be in scope.
Okay, thank you.
And that really builds on the foundations that we've already been set with PASA as well.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Frank McNally.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning. And if I can just build on the questions of David a moment ago, the FCA will be responsible for regulating the dashboard operators, and you've highlighted the standards that you've published around operators and what their compliance is going to be, but conscious of the previous concerns that were highlighted in the last panel, and I am conscious that you are trying to strike a balance between consumer safeguards and not looking to inhibit operators or put any companies off from potentially becoming operators. So how confident are you that you have struck the right balance, and what are your processes for evaluating if you're getting that balance right?
Let me start, and then Nico may want to come in. So just in relation to our role for commercial dashboards, government asked us to make sure that that was a regulated activity. So operators wishing to operate a dashboard required to seek FCA authorisation. There was a lengthy debate through Parliament as the legislation was being progressed around the scope of services that those dashboards should offer. I know on the previous panel there were concerns raised about how restrictive those initial dashboards would be, looking at transactional services, and it's quite right to say that the commercial dashboards do not have an ability to transact on it. That was a government decision that was debated at length because the risk of fraud and scams that was also debated through the development of this of the dashboards legislation. Now, our rules very much seek to strike the right balance, meeting the requirement on us to have the gateway up and running, to seek to allow flexibility for firms, but with very much the government steering the legislation in mind. So I think if some of the question is how might we expect to see these dashboards evolve in future, I think it is quite right that dashboards may well evolve. Some of that may require legislative change. The testing element is obviously critical, but our rules in terms of how we have designed them as the FCA seek to deliver the government intention, the legislative requirements, but also allow flexibility for firms. If I go back to what are we hoping that dashboards will do, we're really hoping that they will drive that better, greater consumer engagement, and also reduce the number of lost pots that there are out there. The statistics on lost pots are that there's around about estimates from the Pensions Policy Institute research in 2024, 3.3 million pensions not matched to consumers worth over 31 billion. And obviously the way that the working profile has changed, we can expect consumers to have a number of different pots, and that number potentially to increase without the ability to track down lost pots. Our consultation when we set out the rules for the commercial dashboard schemes, we've looked to do that as early as we can. We confirmed the rules in November 2024 because we know that it's really important from an industry perspective that people know what the rule set is so that they can start to think about how to design and evolve their business model around it. But I don't know, Nika, if there's anything that you wanted to add.
That's absolutely right. I mean, the parameters that were set out in regulations and DWP regulations are that the data that is displayed that you cannot charge a fee and that the dashboard cannot be transactional. And obviously then our rules that build around that took those parameters into account. I would say I think there's a lot of opportunity for firms to innovate around the dashboard and think through what support they can offer consumers, because once that information is displayed, as others have said earlier in the morning, there will be a lot of need to support consumers with their decision making, with their thinking, and I think we think that our rules leave a lot of room for innovation in that space.
Thank you very much for that. And just finally, I suppose, in addition to some of those points that you've raised there, would you identify any other areas of risk that you're seeking to mitigate?
Let me touch on the, and I'll give an example of the scams risk, which was a very live risk that was debated. So some of the concern was if you allow sort of a straight-through mechanism from a view service through to transacting, that scammers could take advantage of that. To give a practical example of how we've taken that into account in our rule set, there is the ability to export data off a dashboard to the consumer, and our requirements are that the full pensions reference isn't displayed. That's with the aim of making sure that, or trying to make sure that if a scammer was to intercept that, the full details wouldn't be available, that a scammer could then purport to be that person and take advantage of the data to carry out fraud and scams. So that's just a practical example of how we've sought to strike that balance with consumer protection. And also, critically, these dashboards need to have the confidence of consumers from day one, because a confident dashboard with secure data, with a good experience on the end of it, will drive that engagement that we're all hoping for.
Thank you. John Milne.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question really for the FCA in particular. With regard to prospective dashboard operators, how much interest have you seen in developing and operating dashboards? You know, what kind of feedback are you getting?
Let me start. Yeah, we surveyed when we produced our consultation. We think we have about 15 or so entities that are very serious about creating a dashboard. That might not sound like a very large number, but I think that would be a really material contribution to the overall landscape.
Do you think that every supplier will ultimately have their own dashboard, or not?
My instinct is that many of the larger firms think about this as part of their overall service offering. So maybe as something complementary to the pension provision that they already provide at the moment.
Then we talked a bit earlier about the decision to prioritise the money helper dashboard. So commercial private sector dashboards are perhaps some way off. From your point of view, when do you think we're going to expect to see them?
So the decision on launch date very much sits with the government. If I talk about the FCA role, we will have an authorisation gateway, so firms will need to apply to us for authorisation. As I said, we've already set out as much as we can around the rule set. There are some technical standards that would be required to be confirmed from the Pensions Dashboards Programme and from others before we can open that authorisation gateway. And I know firms are keen to have that clarity so that we can open an authorisation gateway. We will have 12 months to authorise to process those applications for to come within our regulatory remit. And I'd look to be able to open that gateway as soon as we can, once all the pieces of the jigsaw are in place.
And your impression of when they might deliver from your conversations?
I think that's a question for government in terms of the launch date. I know the priority, as has been well explained, has been to launch the Money Helper dashboard first, and critically testing the connections. This will be nothing without successful connection and without successful data. So the early staging, half of our 150 firms will be connecting from April this year. That gives us a very good lead in to be able to surface it if there are any issues from that date.
Thank you. And finally, the design standards for dashboards, which are going to be set by the PDP, and which dashboard operators must comply with them. They're going to sit alongside your own rules. Compliance with these standards will be monitored every 12 months by independent auditors. Will you have any role in this layer of regulation?
We expect that we will get information about ongoing compliance, and then there'll be clearly materiality threshold we have to apply in following that through with firms. But our primary responsibility is in relation to compliance with our own requirements.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the questions that we have, unless there are any final points that you would like to make to the panel, or to the committee rather.
Final points. The industry's achieved a lot, I would say. Data quality is absolutely key, and the pensions regulator, we've got this vision of industry leveraging data and technology, and dashboards is really going to shine a light on that. So if you read our data strategy that was released yesterday, this is all connected, and dashboards is a really key feature.
Thank you. We'll look forward to reading that. And
just one final point from me. I think, as I've said before, I really think that dashboards are really significant for us in terms of driving consumer engagement, reducing the number of consumers with lost pots, ultimately helping people to be signposted through to other forms of support, advice and guidance, so that they can make more informed decisions around pensions. We know that that consumers find pensions really complex. We're doing much broader work in the pension space, and also in terms of advice guidance, because we want to see consumers to be able to make more informed decisions. Dashboards by themselves won't deliver it, but dashboards are a really important part of this ecosystem of reform that is ultimately seeking to make sure that consumers have the information available that they need to then make informed decisions around, with pensions, really quite critical decisions for life.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Again, a very, very useful session. Thank you. And we'll switch to our final panel. Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to welcome our third panel for this pensions dashboard session. And perhaps we could start with some introductions. So if we start at the end, if that's okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Ian Patterson. I'm the Senior Responsible Owner for the PDP programme.
Good morning. My name is Kim Webb, and I'm the Programme Director for the programme.
Good morning, Chair. I'm Oliver Morley. I'm Chief Executive of the Money and Pension Service.
Thank you. Again, very warm welcome to you. And I'm going to kick off, if I may. We know that the Pensions Dashboard Programme has been reset a number of times, and specifically in 2023, after the DWP identified some delivery problems. The issues were set out in the NAO report recently. To provide some context, can you remind us what went wrong and what changes were made as part of the reset?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for inviting us here today to talk about the progress we've made. And it is important to understand that obviously there has been some significant change in the programme more widely to make sure that we came out of reset, including the fact that we were, for the most part, we are a new team, and making sure that we have the skills and capability right the way across the programme to implement what I think you've probably already seen is a complex and challenging programme. I'll hand over to Kim to give a bit more context as to how we moved out of reset.
Thanks, Oliver. So, as Oliver says, PDP is a hugely complex digital programme that needs to be delivered safely and securely. It needs to support the connection of thousands of pension schemes of different shapes and sizes and involving millions of member records. As with any large programme, delivery challenges and risks emerge, and the issue that we had with the programme and the reason why it went into reset is because a number of these risks all materialised at the same time. So this was around a lack of capabilities, experience, the technical solution had not been built or had not been completed, and the connection journey just wasn't ready. So this led to an independent assessment which pulled out these issues, and in late 2022, MAPS reported to DWP that it was going to be unable to meet the original legislative deadline of October 25. DWP then commissioned its own review, which led to a recommendation for reset. I was then commissioned or appointed as the reset director by DWP, and then I was later asked to stay as programme director by MAPS. And that's been a really positive thing for the programme because it's enabled continuity, and also from my perspective I've been able to see the programme really turn round into successful delivery, which is where we are today. So I am pleased to say that we are in a very different space today, and I'm confident that we are on track for success.
Do you feel that you have the right team, the right skills and experience now? Oliver mentioned it was a relatively new team, so do you feel that you have that, as I say, that's the skill set that you need to be able to deliver on the new timetable?
So the changes that we made during the reset broadly fall into three different categories. The first is that we addressed the capability gaps in the team. And during the reset period itself, we recruited 38 people across a range of digital delivery, commercial management and project delivery skills. This enabled us to really tackle the issues that had been identified and work collectively on the resolution plans. The second area of change that we focused on was strengthening the leadership team, the senior leadership team. That included the appointment of Ian as our senior responsible owner. But what we also did is looked at the governance arrangements and looked at how we could strengthen the level of critical friends and subject matter experts at the key boards so that we could create more challenge and scrutiny and assurance, but also facilitate the sharing of lessons learned. The third area that we focused on in reset was strengthening the relationship with our supplier, and that's involved moving to a much more collaborative way of working alongside more robust commercial management arrangements. So I think the totality of these changes that we address means that we've got a very strong, resilient, credible team, and we're confident that we can move forward in a positive way.
Okay. I wonder if you want to describe really the oversight that you have from DWP, whether it's provided the right level of oversight and given the nature of the relationship between yourselves and DWP. I don't know if Oliver you want to take that one.
Yes, absolutely. So we, as a team, have a very close relationship with DWP, and I think it's important to note, obviously, they participated very closely in the reset process, and I think it's important to note that one of the things the NAO report more widely, the NAO has said, is that where a project is going wrong, you stop, you pause and take a reset and really consider how you're going to move this programme into a more positive place. I have to say, since I took over, I was last in front of this committee, a different membership, but this committee in my role as Chief Executive of the PPF. And I was very excited about the possibility of getting Dashboard up and running, Maps more widely, but in particular Dashboard. And since I've taken over as Chief Exec, I have to say the relationship has been really, really positive. Our engagement is good, and DWP are directly involved in our programme board, and I would say it is a fairly consistent engagement to the extent that, you know, I took the Permanent Secretary through the Dashboard on Monday as well, just to make sure that we were really, really engaged and close across the board. So I would say positive and a good turnaround story.
Okay, I know, Oliver, you've only been in post for...
for a year now.
For a year, so not that long. And it may be a difficult question to answer, but in hindsight, do you think that MAPS was the right organisation to take the pension dashboard programme on?
I do. I don't think it was a fundamental issue with the Money and Pension Service as a place for dashboard. In fact, when you consider MAPS in the round strategically, the Money Helper website, our own capabilities around delivering financial help to people who really need it, actually, arguably, Pension Dashboard is exactly the right place for it. It was just making absolutely sure we had the capability to deliver. And I think the NAO report is fair in saying that we just did not.
Okay, I'm going to hand over to Jo Baxter now.
Thank you all. So pension schemes and providers now have to connect to the dashboard's ecosystem by October 2026. But the guidance sets out a series of deadlines by which the government would like different cohorts to connect to avoid causing too much chaos and to avoid too many choosing to connect close to the final deadline. How confident are you that most schemes and providers will connect in line with the guidance? And if they don't, what will happen?
We have some very good news on that today, actually. But Ian, do you want to?
Yes, we have 3 of the 19. It was 20, but one of them consolidated volunteer participants. But 3 of them have completed their full end-to-end testing and are fully now connected to the architecture. So it's really, really positive news. Yes, the cohorts are logically for the reason where, as I think you heard earlier, a mixture of large organisations and ISPs that are kind of hoovering up some of the other organisations. They have over 90% of the total pension population. So the vast amount will be connected, and we're highly confident of their connection pace. We're also we're actually accelerating, if you like, through the lessons around how to connect people in a better, more confident sort of way as well. So some early starters, obviously, we learnt through those. It's very much test and learn at that stage, but we're very confident we'll hit the dates.
Can I add as well that we're working very closely with the regulators who I think you just heard from. So the regulators sit on our programme board. So together we will be reporting on where we expect to be with connections and where we actually are with connections, so that we've got the opportunity to take quick action if we think that there is some deviation. So I'm pleased that we've got the right working relationships and the right systems in place.
That's good to hear. How are the other trials progressing?
Trials for, sorry,
the connection trials. So you've got 3 connected at the moment out of the 19. Are you still conducting trials in terms of the others that are not fully connected yet?
Oh yes, they're actually in the process. So they've all registered.
Yep.
There are several stage gates they go through, including the crypto elements to make sure it's secure. So they are all actually on there in one form or the other, but 3 of them have completed that journey end to end.
Okay. So in a way, it's not a trial. Once they're on, they're on, as it
yes.
were, so they're connected.
Okay. And what are the main challenges still facing the programme, and do you envisage any circumstances in which the October 26 deadline wouldn't be met?
Well, I think with any digital programme, of course, we may well face issues in the road ahead, but we are very much taking a test and learn approach to how we continue to move forward with the programme. We have built a very strong, capable and resilient team, so this is enabling us to apply test and learn very quickly and be able to resolve issues as they surface. So at this stage, given the progress that we've made with connections so far and the number of the organisations that are pre-advanced in their connection journeys, we are very confident that we're going to be in a position for all of the pension providers and schemes to have connected by the 31st of October 26. So there's risk, but we're confident that we're managing it, and we're in a good place.
Thank you. Damien Egan.
Thank you, Chair. So with the Money Helper dashboard, the government announced last year that would be prioritised over the commercial dashboards, and you've recently outlined plans for testing that dashboard on consumers. So wondering if that testing has started yet?
Yes, I think the short answer, yes, we're absolutely testing it. And the overall design of Money Helper Dashboard is absolutely consumer focused. So the range of consumer testing is already quite considerable, but is ramping up. And particularly once we have, as I said, and I would like also to offer to the committee a session in which you can see Money Helper Dashboard now as well as a separate invitation. The amount of work that we've already done in terms of consumer testing is considerable, but we have much more to do. And certainly as we move forward and start to move into private beta and then wider beta as well before October 26, we'll be able to take the public through the dashboard and really get them using it properly. But
yeah. I think it's we are going through significant testing through the summer of this year. I think it's really important. We are fundamentally looking at it from a citizen-centric consumer point of view. There was quite a lot of work done in 22 qualitative research around the trust in the brand, if you like, having the Crown and the government site over and above anything else, because citizens just felt that was a safe place to go to view their personal data. So, as Oliver has said, we have got the site. We have actually now connected that site to the actual digital architecture itself, so we can actually see each other and communicate. And I think it's really important that we actually begin that testing with live data, so people can see their actual pensions when they go on board. We're looking to get as many people on board as possible through the summer, because only then we can understand and gauge the reactions and what the onward journeys may look like to complete the service.
Are there any issues or insights from the testing that you've done that you can share with us?
There's a lot of detail in terms of what people expect from a dashboard, and I think people are universally interested and engaged, and certainly at the moment when we're taking people through it, we're using dummy data, so they're not seeing their actual information. I'm sure we'll come on to adequacy in a little bit more detail, but it already starts them answering questions around do I have enough? I didn't know I had all those pensions, and that kind of thing. So there's quite a lot of information that's coming back. I think the other element of the research which is really important is the language that is used. Given the Money Helper Dashboard is intended for everyone, but in particular those most in need, it is making sure that we have a way of translating what can be really abstruse and difficult pensions language into something that we can all understand.
Just add to that, I think the other key here is that having the site at Money Helper points them directly to where the guidance is as well. So there's no coming out of the site completely back into something completely different. So that's really, really helpful.
We seamlessly lead them into the MAPS guidance services as a whole, so they have a way through from the pensions dashboard into our own guidance service.
What information is on there that consumers can access, and how accurate will that be?
As I say, I'd love to show you, and it might be better in that format, because you'll be able to see. But effectively, you will be able to see your DB, your DC pension, your state pension. You'll be able to see your expected income that you would be able to get from that, and obviously in the DC case where there's a pot, you'll be able to see the scale of the pot. You'll be able to see the schemes that have not necessarily been able to get a match because of possible issues, for example, like a change of address or that kind of thing. But you will need to contact a pension provider because based on the national insurance number, we think you've got a match, but we just need to make sure. And you'll be able to see under certain circumstances if a scheme has been is present but is not necessarily connected, which obviously in the early stage when we're taking people through you'll be able to see as well. So there's a lot of information. Probably the best way to talk about it is to demonstrate it, to be honest.
I appreciate it's not really early days, but is early days. In terms of how you see the site developing and evolving over time, and for example, the things you talked about in terms of could you get to a stage where people can increase their contributions through the site?
So going back, and I know the regulator points out that this is not a space for transactions, but what I would say just from a wider perspective, there are policy opportunities that are inherent when everyone can see their pension that are, I think, really should be exciting for everyone. And it's not, for me, just the question of transactions. Something as simple as being able to change your address in one place on all your pension schemes would be a major step forward for a lot of people. So going back to the point around test and learn, it is making sure that we are in a position, both from us in statutory and policy terms, but also technically to be able to iterate. That, for me, is the real possibility inherent in Pensions Dashboard.
And I would add that when we start the consumer testing in the summer, it will be really interesting to observe how citizens actually receive that information and what they then do with that information and the kind of choices that they will be thinking through. So that's certainly something that we want to explore and understand better as we start to scale up with the consumer numbers.
Yeah, just to tell you, we will be feeding that information back out through to the industry, working closely with and through the regulators, so we're all sharing that view, and I think that will help with some of the conversations you may have had around commercial or private sector dashboards as well.
Thank you, David. Amanda Hack.
Thank you, Chair. Before I move on to commercial dashboards, actually, the design standards and how the data will be presented to the consumer, how far along are we in terms of making sure we understand how the data will be presented to the customer?
So Money Helper has already been through what they call the Alpha Assessment, which is government digital standards. That came through with actually, I think there were 2 points that needed to be made on that. I think there's actually only one now that's outstanding. So we have to, although we're not regulated the same way, there are very strict guidelines in presentation format and the digital service and social inclusion and those type of things within the government digital standards array. And we're going back through that beta assessment probably mid to late next year before we go live. That'll be a beta assessment.
And in terms of how that data is presented, we've obviously heard from previous panels that pension adequacy is going to be a real problem for a number of people who are going to access the dashboard. Has that kind of been understood about how we present that information in a way within which that people can immediately get some support if they need to, and that it doesn't create a real issue from people worrying immediately about pension adequacy? So what safeguards will be
It has been considered, but it will really be brought out through the beta testing this summer.
So it will come out in a significant way, but again, it goes back to this point around the MAPS integration, particularly on Money Helper dashboard. So we are building effectively a support model for Pension Dashboard that is built off our own PensionWise capability, which is already existing, and certainly our expectation is we will be able to deal at scale with some of the queries that come from Pension Dashboard, both around adequacy and more widely around, for example, taking commutation or that kind of thing. So we expect to be able to make sure that we can provide onward journeys, and certainly adequacy will be part of that discussion.
Lovely, thank you. So when do you think the commercial dashboards could become available to the general public, and what value do you think they will bring to the overall pension dashboard marketplace?
So we're currently running the commercial dashboard, what we call pre-discovery, going into the discovery phase. That's already doing that with the people that have got the vested interest in it, and also with the regulators present as well, so we can understand more about what it is they want to do, the reasons behind it, and how that will actually work for them. That's very early days. It's only been running since the beginning of the year. We've got further workshops towards the end of this month on that as well. It's difficult to say with any certainty around that data, as you can gather. I'm trying not to go around these circles on it, but realistically, we've got to take the lessons from the Money Helper dashboard going first, and a single dashboard point. Because I said before, you're going to have a lot of, when people will start to look at this and you've had everything running at once, there'll be multiple dashboards they'll be looking at. That's quite a lot of contact and onward journeys to be managed. There's also an awful lot of testing we'd have to do across that as well. And citizens may get confused. They may be looking at one dashboard or seek to get a better result from a different dashboard. But what it will manifest from that is several points of contact back into the pension providers, so they could be inundated on those numbers. So it's best to go forward with one, take the lessons learned from that, run a proper discovery on what the commercial or private sector dashboards could look like and what it would mean, and then we can better articulate and move forward to what that would actually come through in practice and how it would work.
Right.
Thank you. I think obviously you've brought that out in terms of the connectivity between how a commercial dashboard and the service that we need to get delivered will interoperate. So as we're, the challenge going forward, who do you think is going to be responsible to try and bring those parties together? And what do we need to do to plan for this market with lots of dashboards running at the same time?
Well, I think we will initially get all the analysis together to understand what that would look like, and then we'd have to see where that would best be placed in conjunction with DWP, I think. That'd be fair to say. Oliver, would you want to build on that?
I would reiterate the commitment to commercial dashboards, and we absolutely see them as being a fundamental part of this ecosystem. And one thing about PDP is it has been built from the ground up to be able to provide an environment for commercial dashboards. I think that's added complexity, but it's absolutely the right thing to do to make sure the industry as a whole is engaged. There is a real benefit, I think, from Money Helper Dashboard going first, which is it shows some of the issues around security and safety and some of the real consumer challenges that might be out there, and allows us and the regulators and indeed the industry to get a bit more awareness of exactly how consumers are going to react to the dashboard. So I don't want to be preemptive, and I know ministers wouldn't want me to be preemptive around a commercial dashboard launch date. As soon, our intent is to certainly maintain momentum and surprise positively on Money Helper Dashboard in terms of delivery, and then once we have that delivering at scale, then we will be in a good place to be able to talk about definitive dates for a commercial dashboard launch and to work with the industry to make sure that we're ready.
And do you anticipate that the commercial dashboards will have real scope to innovate and move the landscape forward?
Yes, I find it, this is, I don't know, I might be the only person in this room with a Norwegian pension. So I have direct experience running a financial services business in Norway, and the level of consolidation of financial services in a lot of European colleagues who've delivered pensions dashboards. You might have your entire life with one financial services provider in Norway. It is a much, much simpler pensions landscape. And I think we might need to, when you look at the level of innovation, simply delivering a commercial dashboard in this industry with that degree of complexity is a massive amount of innovation in itself. When they have launched commercial dashboards and start integrating with other financial services, it will drive so much innovation in this space.
That's really, really useful to hear. Obviously, with your personal experience from abroad, you, obviously, from the previous panel, it indicated that most people will utilise the commercial dashboards over a period of time. Is that your expectation that that will be how the market moves?
I mean, going to some of the statistics that Richard has spoken to us before on, I think the balance will be slightly different in the UK because of this issue around financial services fragmentation. Money Helper will probably represent a higher proportion. It is very difficult to predict exactly how much will be going by a Money Helper dashboard versus commercial dashboards. But it is equally true to say that the scale will still be very significant on either side of that particular aisle.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before we move on to the final question, I wonder if you're able to help us in terms of the first panels, some of the comments there. So, for example, how do you work with industry? And I'm very conscious that Brian Byrne, the Moneybox representative, indicated that there's a delay in the private sector development of dashboards because of lack of certainty. So I don't know.
Shall I pick that up? I mean that's fair to say. I think we've come through a reset. We're establishing the fact we've got a reset program. We've now got connections coming on board, which is the primary element to focus on that. I think there was some ambiguity till the minister's statement around the commitment of that, and I was aware of soundings in the industry. We work very closely with the industry. We have a pension dashboard advisory group, which is made up from different components of it, and closely work with the ABI as well across the insurance side. So we've got a dedicated principal that talks to the industry, that's from the industry, and they are involved with us all the way through. And I think it's fair to say through the connection process, we're very open and transparent. We publish everything that we're doing around those standards and so forth. So there's good communication, there's good stakeholder engagement. It's fair to say I do understand why people are nervous around the commercial dashboard piece, but we're only going through discovery at the moment, and I think most people that are interested in those dashboards are attending those workshops. So we'll have to build, I think, trust and certainty as we go forward. But there's absolutely a commitment, as Oliver's saying, that we are going to go down that route.
Good. I hope that reassures everybody. But thank you. So is that sort of every couple of months you have those?
The PDAG is every month.
Very good. Thank you. Right, the final question is Steve Darling.
Thank you. I'd like to particularly focus on pension-wise for this last question. And Oliver Morley, we've recently corresponded, so thank you for your really helpful correspondence on this. Whilst there's clear, demonstrable evidence that it's well received pension-wise, is how can you drive greater cut-through? What I'm fearful of is further slippage in the dashboard offer, and therefore the need to ensure that we're reaching out to people as much as possible through the pension-wise service, and also a reflection on what it's the so what stuff. Whilst people may be satisfied and so forth with with the service, what difference has it actually made to our pension service out in the community? Particularly with people who are accessing their pension pots for the first time, are you able to evidence that this has resulted in a more appropriate approach to a pension pot?
So we can provide lots of evidence around pension-wise and being able to have useful appointments and appointments that really make a difference in terms of people making some quite difficult decisions, particularly under difficult financial circumstances, under whether they should take out a lump sum or not, for example. It's worth saying that some of the scale of, for example, Money Helper, our consumer-facing website where PensionWise obviously sits, is significant. So we have around 8 million visitors to Money Helper, so we will be in a good place to be able to make sure that Pension Dashboard as a whole lands well. We're also running a considerable number of, but when you combine money and pensions appointments, we have a significant number of appointments that are being completed on a consistent basis. So far this year on PensionWise, we're around 120,000 appointments, and we certainly expect to be able to deliver on those KPIs. But most importantly, given Pension Dashboard is a digital service, it's also making sure that our digital tools are also absolutely up to scratch and able to deliver and drive people through. this is a world in which it's always fascinated me with pensions, the degree to which people are very, very much open to or wish to engage with different channels depending on their circumstances. So we still run face-to-face pension-wise appointments. We still make sure that people have that option. But it's also a world in which some people just don't want to talk to anyone and are quite happy to do all their financial consultation and help directly with a digital tool or more widely. So there are plenty of options. We want to make sure we maintain those options, and we want to make sure we deliver them productively and at scale. And to have that mix for Dashboard is basically carrying on with the approach that we've been taking and then building with PensionWise now.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes our questions to the panel. I don't know if there are any comments that you would like to make, and please do reflect back from the previous two panels as well.
No, as I say, I'll reopen the invitation for this committee to see Money Helper Dashboard and see how it works.
I personally would very much appreciate that, and lovely. So look, you've got a captive audience. So yes, we will make arrangements to do that at your convenience. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very helpful.
Thank you, committee.